Huzzah! Okay, so the last time I was in Montreal, it looked like this. I'd never seen a snowblower before because I'm from Vancouver, so I was very excited to try it, and they were very happy to let me. And I'm very happy to experience the extremes you have to offer. So I actually talk about Espace VERRE a lot when I travel to all sorts of different schools globally, about your fusion program, its model, and I can't understand why all schools don't have this model, why there isn't this transition from education to practice. That time period is so delicate, it has to be nurtured, and it's something that should be really celebrated here because virtually nowhere else in the world does it, so bravo and brava. Born in Canada, I am, my title is the Director of Material Research and Development for Bocce. It's a design and architecture firm based out of Vancouver, Berlin, and Milan. And I was from Vancouver. And one day, like a lot of people, I walked by a glass factory and stayed till they had to give me a job. And so I did a traditional apprenticeship, 6-year apprenticeship, learning how to work, starting with sweeping the floors, making furnaces, making glass, all those things, building the skills that gave me a career, an empty tank, full annealer, dirty hands, and a full heart. I went to school at Pilchuck Glass School. Myself and institutional learning facilities have never got along very well, but Pilchuck was perfect for me. It taught me how to be open to anything, to find solutions beyond what you'd find in your toolbox, how to think critically, and most importantly, the value of community. Based on the Black Mountain College, it's a sessional structure of artists teaching artists. I learned an enormous amount from this man. This is Randy Walker. He was one of the principals on the William Morris team, working in Pilchuck in the wintertime, exploring, innovating, throwing about every rule out the window, coming up with their own solutions. All it changed was everything. All he changed for me was everything. The odds are on persistence. So here's an example of that. So for my first show at the Traver Gallery in Seattle, I wanted to explore these forms, but I wanted to increase the scale from these different pieces. So I kept trying to punny up the top and it would snap off, and I tried for months. Every month for 3 months, every week for 3 months, I had a pile of glass on the floor, and every week we just kept trying different ways. And this is where this graph comes in handy. I was pretty much at the beginning of it, just past none. So just when I kept trying until I realized it wasn't me, it was the material. It was like my old maestro said, do you know how little you know? You don't even know how little you know. Once you figure out how little you know, then you'll be getting somewhere. The solution was obvious. The glass wasn't structurally strong enough to support the weight of these pieces, so I had to adapt the idea of a snap ring. So $15 worth of metal, weld them together, and tied it to the glass with some stainless steel wire. It's the simplest solution that's the best, to work with the material, not to control it, but flow with it, get out of its way. So we torch both sides, and then you can see the wires that are there. We'd cut the wires off and put the whole pieces together. But of course, this meant the glory hole was half as long as the piece, so I cut the back out of the glory hole so I could flash the piece. And then when you went through to the back and you hit the back of the wall, you knew that that was long enough that you could fit the limit of the annealer. So I built a rack so that you could go from the front corner to the back corner. And all of this to say that these simple solutions are the first answers to barriers presented, but sometimes the most difficult to see. Why don't you touch it some more? That always makes it better. Michael Fox. So I worked at Pilchuck Glass School as a gaffer for many different artists, Angela Filomeno. They would bring ideas, and they would push my boundaries in unexpected ways. I hadn't done any hot sculpting at all, and so I just had to figure out how to make these skulls with the jawbone coming out of the bubble. And then that's Kelly Odell right there. She made the lobster that went on the top. So to create these things beyond my scope was a forced expansion of materiality, I realized how important that was. And so understanding glass from a perspective made a straight line process adjustment between blowing and sculpting, because it was all just heat. Once you learn how to a material, you can then apply that knowledge of material to anything that you want. These are the pieces at the Whitney that were presented. Neatness counts, Nancy Callan. So I also worked for Bruce Mao, amazing designer, Canadian graphic designer, and we worked for him at Pilchuck, exploring these forms that were based on these pieces that were from a Swiss lighting company. They have a room that basically measures the lumens coming off of a fixture. And so he took those light profiles and then spun them three-dimensionally, and then we made them in the hot shop. So we put these things together hot, very large scale, really challenging, but looking at the work I was doing and the adjustment to this meant that these two things could come together really nicely. And so the essence of that artist in resident program is for non-glass artists to bring problems we didn't know needed solving. And that enabled an expansion of material beyond the concept of the field. So these are some of these pieces that we played with earlier this week, alliums and most associated with me. These are really just a exploration of form and gesture, color and balance. Put together hot, we drew these things out, figured out how to work these different forms so they were as natural as possible. A very slim and very fluid form. Now, a lot of people said, why don't you just glue them together? It's actually way harder to glue these things together than just put them hot together. Because once they're all together, they find their own gesture. The weight of each piece as you're turning it falls and the balance point is found, and you just achieve how it looks. We keep the bottoms round, and then I grind them down and find the balance point. These ones are about 50 inches tall, about 1.3 meters. Everything has a balance point. All of us, pieces, you just have to find it. And so a lot of the work I'm doing now, I'm exploring these neon and glass forms. I just started working on at the Museum of Glass and at Pilchuck. Putting the neon inside these things and playing with color, how the tertiary colors as the neon pulls through them. Experimenting with pulling my own tube. So this is an iris guild tube, so it's a reactive color. So as you torch the tube, it changes color. So as you run the neon or argon through it, you get tertiary colors. I was lucky enough to do this residency at the Museum of Glass in Tacoma. And so these pieces are really challenging. And what they do for me is that I'm very by nature want to bring things in tight and clean. And this really forces me to have things off center and not as controlled. So I have to create the conditions, this sort of almost fluxus set of steps, so I can't control what the end piece is going to end up looking like. So these pieces, I want to put them together so they're almost awkward in appearance, and then we'll work with the neon afterwards to pull them together and play around with inside and outside. So like these ones, the ones we did earlier today, this is the first one we did at Pilchuck, where basically we dumped this glass off the blowpipe, and then we just heat the whole form up, and we stick this neck on there. The person who has the neck is basically inflating the entire piece. So we had finished completing the entire piece just as it is now. So however it ends up is how it ends up, and that's really cathartic for me. It's a really good feeling. I love the bucket. I didn't even realize the bucket was sitting there, but to do it right is just so good. It's just classic. They're crazy fun to make. You don't know much, and that's a fact. So just when I thought I had charted a pathway in terms of making my own work, everything changed. And I went to go, and after expanding my practice into the museum world, I was hired as educational coordinator for Pilchuck Glass School. Pilchuck Glass School played a significant role in fostering the studio glass movement and expansion of material beyond its borders. As a vanguard and a crucible for experimentation and exploration in the use of glass as a material, Pilchuck aims to provide their participants with an experiential pedagogical experience while contextualizing their place in the continuum of the medium. Helping plan, facilitating the programming, I was tasked to be an oasis of yes in a world of no, and that was my greatest pleasure. For the most part, as artists, we work in these little tight spots where we're constantly narrowing what we're doing. We don't have access to this. Things are expensive. It's all about no, no, no. It's a world of no. And these spots like Pilchuck and programs like this are here to be an oasis of yes, where you can come and everything is possible. Because once you can figure out that everything is possible, then that's when the new happens. But if you're constantly bombarded by the no, that becomes really difficult. So that year, an instructor backed out of teaching, and the artistic director asked me to step in and teach. So I taught a class in lighting design and iteration. Why light and glass? Where does this fascination come from? Transmission or reflection? There's really no material adept to light transmission as glass. I'd done work for Lindsay Edelman and other designers in New York, going out there and working for Michiko Sakano and her team, blowing glass. So I thought this is a great way to sort of bring in different people and showcase what this material can do. So I wanted to have a designer come in to do a 4-day masterclass in design right in the middle of the 3-week session, because I still had to do my educational coordinator position. And so we couldn't really bring someone from overseas, so we wanted someone local. And so I actually threw an email out to Omer Arbel from Bocce. And amazingly enough, like now that I know Omer and his schedule, it's amazing that he was able to take 4 days to do anything. But he said, sure, I'll come down for a couple days. And so he was like, I'll come down Monday to Wednesday. I'm like, perfect. I said, actually, if you come down Sunday night, you can have dinner, and then we'll wake up first thing in the morning, Monday morning, and then you can start then. He's like, okay, I'll come down on Sunday night. I'm like, actually, Dale's blowing on Sunday, so the whole crew's going to be there. Mongrain's going to be blowing. Why don't you come down Sunday morning, and then you can see them blowing. I'm like, well, you know what? They're starting at 9. Why don't you just come Saturday night? So he came Saturday night, and we hung out on Sunday, and he was able to watch that, and then we started to work together, and he created this system, basically, that we coalesced around one design by, and this is Aya Oki, who's just actually been, I think she's nominated for the Loeb Prize. Great design, and it was really an amazing experience working with him. Very inquisitive, really has enough experience at glass that I go, no, that's not going any further. Don't push it any further. Don't waste our time. But also really like excited about everything. And it's something that I've been really familiar with doing by working with so many designers and architects and artists. So this is the installation of the work in the Trojan Horse. So I went to Vancouver to meet with them. We did a piece, the 87, so I went to consult on them to take a look around and talk to them. And so in the first, it's at the Mitchell Press building down in Vancouver, and they basically cut half the roof out, and they had these trees growing out of the roof. And it completely transformed the top of this building, this really old building. And I walked through it, I'd seen like probably 5 or 6 things I'd never even seen done before in glass. And so we started talking, and then they made me an offer. And I visited Pilchuck, which is the greatest place for glass on earth. And they basically said, come back to Canada. Let's do this and work together. And so the timing was right. It was an opportunity to come back to Canada closer to my family, which was in Victoria. And so less commuting back and forth. So Bocce and Omer Arbel Office are an umbrella organization for an exploratory art practice. We're based in Vancouver. This is Berlin space. This is where we had just hosted the Glass Art Society conference. And in Milan, we have an apartment palazzo in Milan where we basically do different installations. We used to do Euroluce and the different design shows, but you would have to build this entire booth. It was a magnificent booth. There's some pictures of it coming up. But then at the end of the show, it would be taken down and all that would go to the trash. And we thought, for the amount of cost that it takes to do this, why don't we just get an apartment palazzo and just install everything there? Then we can do, you're in the middle of all the salone work where we want to show work. We can showcase artists and designers that we like. We can try different installations. We can bring clients there. So now we do stuff with Fashion Week and all things all year round throughout Milan. So we use the space to explore. This is 76. These are the 16 trees. These are the 87s. These are the pieces we started at Pilchuck. So all of Omer's projects are numbered. So this is a 28 on an armature. And these are 16 on armature. You can see that this was our space in Charlottenburg before we got our new space in Berlin and in Wilhelm Holland. And these are the 84s. So I mean, as lights, Bocce lights really aren't that great at giving any light, to tell you the honest truth. But for the most part, most modern houses have light, task lighting all assigned to them. Really what we do exceptionally well is sculpturally activating space. You know, we're there to create moments of wonder and light to inhabit space as opposed to have it for someone who can just do their task reading or writing or anything. So my first job there was to build a new hot shop. We had a 3-car garage, so we needed to build a hot shop for them. So they said, just go ahead and build what you want to build. Turns out it's pretty handy having architects in a space. So I stole the windows from the previous tenant when they was being demoed, and then I stole the door from the basement at the Mitchell Press building, and set up this space. So Omer designed the hood. I gave him 4 different options, and he gave me the 5th and the 6th, which is a 10-foot aluminized carbon steel, bent and TIG welded, so you don't see any edges of the metal, so you can see the thickness there as you come around the corner. So we have a great view of the dockyard, so we're right on the railway tracks. All the heat shields are insulated, and all the processes and everything, the equipment that's in there is based to be as quiet as humanly possible, so that the group of people that we have can not be exhausted at the end of the day. Glassblowing is tough work. It's hard. So we remove those barriers. So we have a gender balanced team that negates male ego gatekeeping. So many of the factories that you see throughout Europe are all men. Unable to admit any wrong or the ability to see any other pathway. It's completely limiting. It's a great crew. They have their own practices, which we support over at Terminal City Glass Cooperative, as well as this means they have the energy of the day to feed their own part of their lives. That's why we create the environment that's really clean and good to go. There's lots of amazing glass blowers, but that's not what I search for. The blowers at Bocce need to be explorers as much as the producers. They need to be in love with failure as much as success, because they're both equal teachers. And that can be a difficult and uncomfortable space for many to inhabit. But I'll bet no one fails as well as we do. I mean, we really excel at failure. If you don't know what the outer limits of material are, how do you know where you're standing? I have a different glassblower every week do prototyping. So completely different trajectories born from their perspectives. So what does that look like? So this is the 73. This is blown into a high temperature ceramic fabric. An exploration arc that when combined with these, which are the 44, we cast aluminum into scrap bonded sand at the foundry, and then they pull out, cleaned up, and used as a conductor between the lights. You can see the power comes in one side of the aluminum, goes through the light in the middle, and comes out the other side. This is at the Barbican in London. These are incredible, but it's the process that we're exploring. We never have any drawings. There's never make this, do this. It's only ever a relationship between things. So now that we've done this, other processes are like this. So instead of sand that we're pouring aluminum into, we put ice blocks and we pour wax into them and spin a bucket that the ice is in. And then in order to ship them, because they're so fragile, we freeze them in blocks of ice, put them in a container and use the already existing shipping systems for shipping frozen things globally. Then they come to the client, the water melts off, and then they can have the candle in one piece. So now, take that same idea. Here's hay. Put the hay in bags. Stack the hay up and spray foam between the hay. Take all the hay out, and you're left with these sculptural objects. This is a piece we're doing for the Berlin Art Fair in September. So now we're starting to move into larger and larger spaces. Okay, so now the hay is stacked. Oh. Now the hay is stacked, and wait. Okay, sorry. Chris. So instead of foam now, we pile up that hay and we put landscape cloth over top of it, and then we pour concrete. Then we have spaces that we're built. Combining those fabric forms of the 73 process that we were blowing that glass into, and the 44 we have our new headquarters that we'll be building. So this is a 5-story building that we're building in Vancouver. It's currently in battle with the city because it's weird and it's different and they don't like that sort of thing. So up through the middle of this and the top 2 floors, we have this courtyard that comes up. So all of the walls that you see, this sort of surface, in behind that, all that is glass, 28-foot ceilings, all open up. So basically the air will be able to flow right through the building and then up through this courtyard in the middle, which is on the 4th floor where we will have our new hot shop. So that's what it's going to look like. So each of these snoods that come down, those are the exhaust, and then we have just teeny pinholes on the top. So then those are jacketed, and they take draw the heat out of the room and off the units, and then recuperate that to give heat to the rest of the building. The floor underneath all of the units has a glycol water mixture going through it to reclaim heat from there and distribute to the rest of the building. All the heat shields will have a photovoltaic system that we're developing, so that basically as the doors are open and that radiant energy comes out, it'll be captured in the photovoltaic cells, converted into electricity, and go to banks of batteries that we'll use to power the building and also charge cars that are downstairs. That's a fun project that we're working on. Yeah. It's a lot of moving parts. So 94, this is an architectural model for an exhibition. I think it has exhibition at the Alles Gallery in Berlin. So there's a series of home on Governor's Point that we made. We took logs from that point. And so you can see all these little clumps of wood. Those are basically from the logging industry and the scrap wood that basically isn't able to use. This is all you'll see from the point. So these will be those are little skylights that come down. And so when you're out on the water, you won't be able to see anything. They'll basically just be these things just like this, kind of hiding in the trees. So all of these pieces of wood, we took the chunks of wood and we got an old cement mixer and we cut the guts out of it. And basically we throw them in there and we tumble them so they're all round. And then we're sticking those on steel pikes that go into the side of the building. So when it faces out, those will all get covered over with moss and it'll quietly disappear into the landscape. So the property itself is about 130 acres or so. And so what we've done is we've donated 110 acres of that to the Whatcom Trust, which is basically the majority of the peninsula, and have turned it into a public park, which has trails all throughout it, access to the beaches, including the point. Originally, they were out on the point with the head of the Whatcom Trust, and he said, Randy, this is really the best view. And he said, you're right, we should just get rid of this house and just keep the view for the public. So we just got rid of one house and left the entire point for the people. Because there's actually this really amazing thing that you can do when you work within architecture. You can purchase these big pieces of land that are in sensitive areas. Sometimes they're logging areas, tree farms, things like that. And you can basically section off a very small part, build a little house, and donate the rest to the community forever as public park. And that's an ethos that these guys live by, is that trying to use that leverage to create more park space and more ecosystem that's saved, as opposed to someone coming in and developing all of it and tearing it all down. 75.9, this is a private residence built in Vancouver that won the World Architectural Prize. It explores its space and a new methodology of concrete making, utilizing that fabric that we were talking about. We're basically putting that landscape fabric between these stays of wood. And those hold the fabric back, and then we're able to do these pours. So some of these are about 20 meters tall. So we had to come up with a different way. We work with different companies, concrete companies, because if we were to pour this in one shot, basically we would just blow the fabric out in the bottom. So this is an 18-hour pour with a concrete that was developed for us that cures fairly quickly, so it cures as it pours, so the hydraulic pressure doesn't blow the bottom out. Because they're hollow, so we can plant trees in them. And so you can see them here, they start to interact with the house. And here's the finished home. Yeah. It's a language built on process. So Omer Arbel, you see everything wants you to be one thing. So who's Omer? He's an artist, process-based sculptural practice that results in objects, sometimes, products, sometimes, performance, sometimes, and then, yes, buildings as well. So here's a great one, 113. So this was born out of Omer's, he really loves the connection between copper and glass. And so we started exploring making glass and copper fit with each other, which is extremely difficult, but it's taken me about 7 years. We're just about there, 6 or 7 years. And so once we do one thing, we do the opposite. So the thing we wanted to do was, let's make the glass explosively come off the metal, so we can slip cast molten metal into glass. So this is what we do. We blow these forms with a formulation of glass on the inside, so they're violently opposed to each other. The glass blowers make whatever form they want. We don't dictate that at all. So the stuff pours in, and sometimes it just skates across the surface. It's so thin, it's like paper. It's kind of gossamer. We let those cool down, and you can see all the glass breaks off of them, and you're left with these beautiful patterns, these sort of vestiges of what the form was. And these amazing colors that happen are there because as the glass is sitting on that metal, the latent heat from the glass that's around it tempers all those colors out in the different metals. So now we use them, now we have this process, what to do with it. Omer made an idea. What if we went to the V&A and we chose copper objects and glass objects from their collection, we melted them down, the glass, blew a form, and then poured the metal pieces into it, and washed it around and did a transmutation of these objects. The curators weren't that excited about melting down the objects from the V&A, so we had to go hunting at different shops for them. So this is the V&A in the courtyard, and this is the Chiara Chapel. So this group of nuns based in Italy, but there's also a couple around the world. They were a cluster of nuns that took in women and young women that society didn't want, and they trained them to be craftspeople, working at an extremely high level of making different furniture, everything. And there was this sort of craft guild, as you could say, of women throughout the ages that basically were in these nunneries in the Chiara Chapel. So this chapel is from Italy. That one closed down, so of course it ended up in the V&A. I never understand how these things work, but that's okay. So we had the objects on a plinth at the V&A, and then we're going to do glass blowing in the courtyard. So we planned, we built benches, we borrowed from Berlin Glass, their furnace. We went to London, and we built. And this is how you get. Is that not going to do it? No, it's not going to do it. Okay. So this is how you get things through the V&A, through the front door, through the gift shop, and through the sculpture gallery, past the plinths. These are steel I-beams that we're rolling through at the early morning before anyone gets there, building up in the courtyard of the V&A, this cantilevered with stage, so we can start to do this performance. So here are all the pieces in the Chiara Chapel, in a procession bringing them back and forth. So this is like a day's worth of metal and glass. We melted down the glass, we melted down the metal, and then we made these pieces. It was a pretty amazing experience. So these are some of the pieces that were there, and then they came back and replaced the objects in the Chiara Chapel. So it was interesting because you have this, like, what is the perceived value? It's a lot of things he was exploring there. So what is the perceived value of these objects that we bought? A lot of them we bought on Camden Road in different places. When we walked in with these glass and metal pieces, the security guards were like, just a second there, where did you get that from? And we had to convince them, it's like, no, we brought these with us, it's fine. And the curator was there with us. So these things that sometimes we bought at flea markets, they were then put in the V&A. So there's a transmutation of value there. It's now in the V&A, so its perceived value is more. So then we melt it down and we turn it into sculpture, and again, that's changed in terms of its value. So what is my job? What do I do? A lot of it is this. It's a job description, not a psychological evaluation. But I'm supposed to figure out why are they all so different. Same light, why are they all different? Different color temperatures. Why does the opaline look like that? These are the same gray, right? From the same manufacturer, the same gray. These are okay, right? No, these are not okay. Why are they blue? Why are they gray? Trying to figure that out. Is this a happy piece of glass? How happy? Is it happy enough that it could be in a Chinook in Calgary in the wintertime and be outside, because these are outside? I stick them in a blast freezer and I take them out and stick them on the roof of the studio so I can see what happens. Why is the white different every single day? These are hundreds. So wait, why the number? So lots of theories, but mine is that by not naming projects, by not giving this like a name and numerically delineating them, you're forced to look at the projects rather than associate them with that name. Names have enormous power. And so by negating that, we force you to look at the pieces unto themselves as opposed to the power that a name would have on them. So the hundreds and how we put these things together, the goal is to achieve a structure and a gesture that's so natural that it becomes part of the space, not an intervention. They celebrate space. So we get a direction or idea, a relationship to come back to Omer, go through the results, free form, no restrictions, and we have to follow those results to the end of that line. Sometimes that results, yields a result, we move forward. A lot of times it's just documented and swept up. So, we never have any drawings. No, make this shape, make this light. We rely on a diverse set of makers that we have to take things in as many directions as possible. I have about 14 briefs open on my desk. Maybe 2 will amount to anything. other than expansions of materiality and knowledge. But that's just perfect. As Dr. Jane Cook said, the only failed experiment is the one where you weren't paying attention. And the goal is to achieve a set of processes that are scalable. In this video, for me, it really encapsulates this experience. So often in our practices, there's a focusing or narrowing of energy. Places like Pilchuck, their programming intended to be a place of expansion, to remove barriers. Participants are removed from the regular routine on campus in the middle of a forest, sleeping when they do, in dorms, eating together in the lodge, bombarded with information. It takes creates the conditions for enormous breakthroughs, creative and emotionally. Some take longer than others. But when it does happen, it can be and often is magical and life-changing. And our job is to be an oasis of a yes in a world of no, to facilitate ideas no matter how long and how they may take to happen. So that's the crux of the practice. Process rather than idea that can be adapted into so many concepts. Some briefs are much more complicated than others, which takes me to places to seek partners with explorations beyond our scope. The Rakow Library to deep dive chemistry and the physics of what glass is and how it behaves. Why it does what it does gives a greater understanding of materiality than it can be applied to anything. This is so beautiful. That is the stress of those two pieces of wire going through that glass. This is beautiful. Look at this factory. This is the Lambert's factory. The equalization of knowledge to practice means every aspect is valuable. This constant march to separate and elevate the head above the hands has been so prevalent in last century's educational systems has contributed to a lack of skilled tradespeople working with the material. It's an old story. Everyone respects the skills that take years of constant honing the production facility affords, but nobody wants to credit what that means. Worship the hands, not what made them. There's a direct linkage to that past that constrains and elevates at the same time. This is still the case in many places. We're unable to expand and explore freely because this is our culture. Smash everything, change everything. Nothing's off the table. Make tools your ideas, fuck the rules. Yes to everything, yes to everything. So what does that typically look like? We start the 118 with a relationship between the copper and opal white, gathering of the copper white over the sphere, and sucked in. So we do the opposite. We picked up the sphere in blue, and all of a sudden, this thing fell on the floor. So you see the tag there? Everything that we do is videoed, photographed. The ephemera of those things are then tagged. Notes are made in books of the process. Those are all time-stamped. And these pieces go up to the archivist, who then photographs them properly, puts them in a crate, and they go to our archive out in our warehouse. Everything is kept. So we saw this beautiful gossamer threads of these around the copper. But then how do we get the copper sphere out? So I'm like, okay, so we just welded up a steel cage, popped white into that, and gathered over top of it, and then tried to blow the bubbles through the cage. And it's like, well, that's cool. And so we tried to control that more, but the thing kept falling off the end of the pipe. So we made another one, and we tied it to the pipe with wire. And so then from there, in many different iterations, as you can see here, we've gone to this, which is basically, we made a ring at the top with a little rock. We just bought blowpipes, and we welded rings onto them, and they lock into place, and then it's stable against the piece. Then you can blow the white, get your successive gathers of clear, and when those bubbles blow out into the piece, they're scraped off, and they all end up in this piece of glass. So now when we did this first piece, you can see the opening there. That's where all the bubbles come together. That's where we figured we would stick the light. But as soon as Amer saw that, he goes, that's the most important part of this. You need way more bubbles, and we need to celebrate that by cold working that surface, exposing those bubbles, and then cold working another surface and drilling through. And so that's what these look like, off and then on. So they're these really magical pieces that use the density of white, a self-generating system. Then we take those cages and we just stick them in water, we clean them off, and we reuse them. We've used them probably 60 or 70 times so far, and they're still fine. Completely reusable every time. This is so beautiful. This is the inside of a color furnace, the dull blue of it. It's amazing. So I explored different places. This is where you make color bar. It used to be videos, but apparently they're not anymore. And the reactions of them. This is the white is the same color turning striking into pink. So I'm going to close with a story about this guy I met at this small glassblower's bar in Czech. He was in really rough shape. He was really trashed. And so he was just kind of leaning up against the wall, and they would drop down a shot, and he would kind of come to you and take the shot, put it back down again. And so my friend Emil said, we got to put this guy to bed. I'm like, okay. So we put him to bed, and then we're going back to the bar. He said, you know who that guy is? I said, no, I have no idea who that guy is. He said, that's the best melter of this entire area. Makes color. He's been trying to figure out how to do this color, just get it right, and it's just, you can't figure it out. And last night, he spoke with his dead master in the furnace flames, and his dead master told him how to do the flame, how to adjust it, how to adjust the color, and he was finally able to do that color. 1 foot standing and an unbroken link of knowledge, the old and the new. It's a tough path, forging across the divide, standing on the shoulders of giants. And that's where this graph comes in real handy. We bring together art, architecture, and design with the DIY of the studio glass movement, but deny the boundaries of the respective labels. We say yes to everything. In fact, we insist upon it. And if we ride pretty much the beginning of this, just past none, we can stay open to all the possibilities that can happen, and the experience helps take us across to the other side. This is done by creating and fostering and feeding the generative possibilities of a rhizomic ecosystem of nonlinear expansion. It's facilitated the cross-pollination of divergent streams of material studies while enabling collaborative entrepreneurial events supported by sympathetic systems of technological sustainable infrastructure. It's a system built on wonder, exploring in the dark, trying to light a different path. All it changed was everything. All it changed for me was everything. Thank you so much for having me. Any questions?